The slap cracked through the cabin like a dropped tray of glass. For a heartbeat, the jet went silent. The hum of the auxiliary power unit. The faint clink of ice in crystal glasses. The whispered click of a phone camera starting to record. Then, "What is wrong with you?" a woman's voice shouted. "You do not put your hands on a passenger." Rows of wide leather seats turned into a theater, 12 strangers in designer jackets and travel-worn sneakers leaning into the same moment. Breath held. At the center of it all, in aisle 2, the flight attendant stood rigid, her hands still half raised, her face frozen in an expression that couldn't quite decide if it was horror or justification. And in the seat beside her, the black woman she had just slapped slowly turned her head back. The woman's cheek was already blooming red against brown skin, the faint outline of fingers visible under the cabin's cool LED lights. Her hair, a crown of silver curls pulled back with a silk scarf, had shifted from the force. A single earring lay in her lap like it had leapt there to escape the impact. The woman blinked once, twice. Then she exhaled. The flight attendant said, but her voice shook. I warned you. You can't just sit here. You can't just walk onto a private charter like you own the place." The words hung there. Like you own the place. The black woman's hands lay folded over the handle of a simple black leather handbag, skin papery but steady. She was small, her frame swallowed by the cream cashmere cardigan draped over her shoulders, and the deep laugh lines around her mouth looked wrong paired with the sharp red mark on her cheek. Across the aisle, a man in a navy blazer lifted his phone higher. "I'm already recording," he murmured, almost apologetically, toward the older woman. "I'm recording this. This is not okay." From the front galley, another crew member hurried in, the lead flight attendant, taller, with a tight bun and an even tighter expression. "What is going on here?" she demanded. "We haven't even closed the door and there's shouting. We will remove passengers if we have to. I don't care who you think you are." The first flight attendant pointed at the older woman, her chest heaving. "She stormed on without showing ID," she said. "No boarding pass. No manifest match." Then she refused to move when I told her this is a contracted jet. She kept insisting, "I'm supposed to be here. This is my plane." A soft ripple of scoffs moved through the cabin. One passenger in a branded hoodie muttered, "Yikes," under his breath. Another whispered, "This is why there's security," like she was reassuring herself. The older woman, still seated, still calm, turned her gaze from the furious crew to the cluster of passengers watching her like an unfolding mess on a highway. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was quiet. "I told you," she said, looking up at the lead attendant. "My name is Lorna Hayes. I am exactly where I am supposed to be." The lead attendant gave a dry, disbelieving laugh. "Okay, Ms. Hayes," she said, with a twist of sarcasm around the honorific. "Well, Ms. Hayes, this aircraft is fully chartered for corporate transfer. We have a manifest. Your name is not on it. So unless you have security clearance you haven't shown us, you need to deplane. Right now." From row 3, a younger woman in a sharp gray suit raised a hand timidly. "I'm sure it's just a mistake," she said. "She could be on the ground manifest instead of the cabin one. They do that sometimes." "She slapped her," the man with the phone said sharply. "There's no mistake that justifies that." The first flight attendant flinched. "She grabbed my arm," she protested. "She was shoving past." I touched your sleeve," Lorna said, still in that same calm tone. "And I asked you not to raise your voice at me." Behind them, the cabin door was still open to the jet bridge, and a figure in a Navy uniform, the first officer, was standing there, blocking the entrance to curious ground crew. "We need to solve this now," the lead attendant snapped. "Captain wants to know if we're going or if we're calling security. I say we call them." The words hit the air like a toggle flipped. "Call security. Remove her. Get her off the plane." Lorna's fingers moved, just once, to smooth the scarf at her shoulder. The handbag that lay under her hands was unbranded, the kind of understated accessory that suggested old money, old habit. She sat back against the plush cream seat and took a breath. Every phone in the cabin seemed to rise at once. "TikTok is gonna eat this up," someone whispered. "This is insane. Don't they? Look at her." Doesn't matter, another voice answered, low. Some people see an old black woman and just see problem. The lead attendant drew herself up to her full height, authority coiling around her like a cloak. She said, crisp and rehearsed. If you do not leave this aircraft of your own accord, we will have airport security escort you out. You are delaying departure. You are causing a disturbance. This is a federal issue. I'm asking you one last time. Stand up. Take your things. Get off this jet. The older woman looked from the lead attendant to the first. Her left cheek throbbed, each heartbeat a dull drum beneath her skin. But her eyes, a deep, steady brown, were clear. Is that your final decision? She asked gently. The lead attendant's lips curled in impatience. It is, she said. You have no right to be here. Lorna gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Very well, she said quietly. She reached for the clasp of her handbag. No sudden moves. The first attendant snapped immediately, taking a step back like this fragile grandmother might suddenly lunge. From half a dozen angles, cameras caught the flinch, the recoil, the accusation hanging in the air, heavier than the word. Lorna paused and lifted her hands slowly, palms open, so that everyone could see. Everything is about to change, she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. And as her fingers closed around the cool metal of the phone inside her bag, the lives of every crew member on that aircraft balanced on the edge of the next 10 minutes. 8 hours earlier, Lorna Hayes sat alone in a dim kitchen, cupping a warm mug of tea between her hands. The house was quiet at that hour, the way she liked it. Dawn pressed one pale hand against the horizon, spilling a gray-blue light through the long windows that overlooked the small garden she'd planted the first year she could finally afford a yard. She watched a single leaf shiver on the lemon tree outside and smiled. The kettle, forgotten on the counter, ticked as it cooled. On the table in front of her lay an open folder, its contents neat and squared off. Printed reports, fleet performance graphs, a familiar logo in navy and silver stamped on every page. Skybridge Aerospace Group. Underneath, in smaller letters, the names of its subsidiaries, including the one most people knew simply as Skybridge Charter, a boutique private jet company that catered to executives who didn't want to be seen and celebrities who did. Her name appeared at the top of the first page. Chairwoman and majority owner, Lorna R. Hayes. She traced the letters absently, not looking at them, her mind drifting. You're up early again, came a voice from the doorway. Her granddaughter, Zoe, padded into the kitchen in fuzzy socks and a college sweatshirt, hair twisted into a huge pineapple on top of her head, thumbs already busy on her phone. She dropped a kiss on Lorna's forehead before collapsing into the chair opposite her. You never went to bed, Lorna corrected, amused. Semantics, Zoe said around a yawn. You're leaving today, right? The board thing. The board thing, Lorna echoed, smiling. Yes, quarterly review. Fleet expansion vote. Argument about why we don't need our own mobile app when we charter planes, not pizza. Zoe laughed. Have you considered just saying, because I said so? Pretty sure billionaires are allowed to do that sometimes. Lorna's eyes twinkled. I remember when I couldn't afford bus fare, she said. That memory keeps because I said so out of my mouth. Zoe sobered a little, studying her grandmother's face. You ever get tired? She asked. Like, of carrying it all. This company, the history, the expectations. Lorna sipped her tea, letting the warmth anchor her. Tired, she mused. Sometimes. But I remember being 18, standing in line at the unemployment office with your mother on my hip, and hearing the clerk call the woman in front of me girl and call the man behind me sir. She looked down at her hands, at the pale scars that crossed 2 knuckles from long-ago factory work. I remember telling myself, if I ever get a chance to own something, really own it, I will make sure no one who works for me forgets the difference between serving and servitude. Zoe propped her chin in her hand. And now you own planes, she said softly. Real, actual planes. Those didn't fall from the sky into my lap, Lorna said dryly. You know how many shifts I worked at the plant? How many nights I took online classes after you were asleep? How many bank officers laughed in my face when I said I wanted a business loan? You sued one of them, Zoe pointed out, a little proudly. I filed a complaint, Lorna corrected, and we settled, with enough money to start a tiny charter brokerage. One desk, one phone, one client who kept calling me sweetheart but also kept paying on time. And now there are, what, 40 jets? Zoe asked. 42, Lorna said. If the board approves the new additions today, we'll have 4 to 7 by the end of the year. Zoe whistled quietly. You ever walk onto one of your planes and just flex, she said, grinning. Like, bow before me, peasants. Just once. Lorna laughed, the sound low and warm. You and that imagination, she said. I'm serious, Zoe insisted. You dress all incognito. You sit in the back. You let people underestimate you. It's like your favorite hobby. What's the point of being the boss if nobody knows it? The point, Lorna said gently, is that the people don't change how they act because I am watching. The point is that I get to see the truth. Zoe's smile faded as the meaning settled. You mean, the way they treat you, she said slowly. The way they treat anyone who looks like me, Lorna said. She reached across the table and laid a hand over Zoe's. You'd be surprised, she murmured. How many people can look at a woman my age, with my skin, in an airport, and decide in a single second that I am either invisible or in the wrong place? Zoe's jaw tightened. And you just let them, she demanded. You could fire them. You could. She gestured vaguely, like summoning lightning. Do the billionaire smite thing. Lorna squeezed her granddaughter's hand. Sometimes, she said quietly, the lesson lands harder if you let them show all of who they are in public, with the whole world watching, before you change their lives. Zoe's eyes widened. That sounded ominous, she said. Just old, Lorna replied. She finished her tea, then pushed back her chair slowly, her knees protesting a little after yesterday's walk in the garden. She crossed to the coat stand by the door and lifted her trench from its hook. Zoe watched her, suddenly serious. You sure you don't want an escort or something? She asked. You know what people are like. You're flying under the radar, on your own company's charter, with no one announcing who you are. They could treat me like they would any old black woman in an expensive space she's not expected to occupy. Lorna finished, slipping one arm into her coat. Exactly, Zoe said. Lorna slid the other arm in and turned, her scarf catching the morning light, the silver threads woven through it sparkling briefly. I am counting on it, she said. Zoe frowned. Why? She asked. Lorna reached for her handbag, that same unbranded leather, worn smooth by years of use. She checked, out of habit, for the cool weight of her phone, the reassuring rectangle of a tablet, the slim folder of physical documents she insisted on carrying even in a digital age. Because, she said, there's a difference between reading complaints on paper and standing in the middle of the cabin while someone tells you that you do not belong on your own jet. Zoe's eyes flashed. If they do that, she said fiercely, I hope you handle it, Lorna finished gently. In my own way. Zoe looked at her long and hard, then smirked. You always do, she said. Grandma. Yes, baby. If anyone lays a hand on you. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Lorna smiled, a little sadly. They won't, she said, with a certainty that, in retrospect, would haunt her. But if they do, she added softly, they'll only get to do it once. Back on the jet, the phones were everywhere. One wedged between manicured fingers, its camera framed in a designer case. Another half hidden behind the headrest, the tiny lens peeking over like a curious eye. One propped casually against a water bottle, live streaming to a chat exploding in real time. What's happening? Is that a private jet? Why is she yelling at that old lady? She slapped her? Tag me in part 2. The lead flight attendant, whose name tag read M. Kerrigan, was acutely aware of the phones. She glanced at them in quick, irritated flickers as if willing them to vanish. We are not doing this, she muttered under her breath. I am not getting memed. She turned back to Lorna, who had finally, carefully, retrieved her phone from her bag. No sudden movements. Every gesture deliberate, visible, almost ceremonial. Put the phone away, Kerrigan ordered. You can call whoever you want once you're off my aircraft. This isn't your aircraft, Lorna replied softly. It's not yours either, snapped the first attendant, cheeks flushed. Our company contracts with Skybridge for these exec transfers. We handle the cabin. We're responsible for safety. You can't just walk on with a suitcase and an attitude. You people. She stopped herself. Too late. Lorna's gaze sharpened. You people, she repeated quietly. The air seemed to thin. People who think rules don't apply to them. The attendant finished quickly, but the damage was done. The words dangled, heavy with the weight of centuries they had not named but had certainly remembered. Lady, maybe just stop talking, someone muttered from row 4. Is security coming? Another passenger whispered anxiously. I have a connection in New York. I can't afford a delay. Kerrigan pressed her lips together. I'll handle it, she said. She leaned toward Lorna, voice dropping to a low warning. If you don't comply, I am placing you on the no-fly list for this network, she hissed. You will never board a contracted Skybridge flight again. You understand me? Lorna studied her for a moment. Her cheek had stopped burning. Now it felt oddly cool, almost numb, as if her body were conserving her rage for later. Lift up your phone, she said calmly. Kerrigan blinked. What? Lift up your phone, Lorna repeated. Since you're so concerned about rules, I want you to read something aloud. For the cameras. A ripple of interest passed through the cabin. The man with the navy blazer leaned forward. Oh, I am here for this, he murmured, adjusting his angle so the microphone would pick up every word. This is not a game, Kerrigan snapped. I'm not. This will take 30 seconds, Lorna said, and it might save your job. Somewhere in the back, someone snorted. Doubt it. Kerrigan hesitated. Her hand twitched toward her pocket where her work phone rested beside the paper manifest and her schedule for the day. Fine, she said finally, exasperated. What do you want me to read? Open your company intranet, Lorna said. Log into the crew portal. Search the name Hayes. Hayes. The first attendant rolled her eyes. We don't have time for this, she said. We have time. The first officer called from the open doorway, surprising everyone. His voice was steady, but his face was pale. Captain says we don't move this aircraft until this is resolved. We're in a ground hold for at least 20 minutes anyway. Weather. A few passengers groaned softly, but no one put their phones down. Kerrigan glared toward the cockpit, then yanked her phone from her pocket. Fine, she muttered. If it will get you to stand up and walk out like a grown adult, fine. Her fingers moved quickly, muscle memory carrying her through the login process. Crew ID. Password. Two-factor authentication ping. Lorna watched her impatient tap of the foot, the tightness of her jaw. Search Hayes, Lorna repeated. Kerrigan typed. The screen filled with results. Crew announcements. Policy updates. Safety bulletins. And near the top, with a small star beside it. From the desk of the chairwoman, a letter from Lorna R. Hayes. The thumbnail image was small but clear. The same silver curls, the same deep brown eyes, the same calm, steady face, minus the fresh red mark on her cheek. Kerrigan stayed at it. Then her gaze jerked up to Lorna. Read it aloud, Lorna said quietly. Kerrigan swallowed. I'm not. I. Read. It. Aloud, the man in the blazer repeated, his voice hard. You owe her that much. Phones leaned in. Stream comments flew up superimposed on the scene. Loudly crying face, she knew what she was doing. Not them realizing ON camera. Grandma said open the portal like a final boss. Kerrigan's lips parted soundlessly for a moment. Then she cleared her throat. From the desk of the chairwoman, she read, voice flattening. A letter from Lorna R. Hayes, founder and majority owner, Skybridge Aerospace Group. The words seemed to echo. Founder and what? Someone said sharply. Owner, repeated another passenger, with dawning comprehension. Wait, what? Kerrigan's hand shook now, just enough for the tremor to jostle the little letters on the screen. Her eyes darted from the photo to the woman in front of her. The resemblance was no longer a coincidence to be dismissed. It was a mirror, and the reflection was undeniable. She stammered. This could be An old photo. Does the letter have a date? Lorna asked, still calm. Kerrigan looked. 2 weeks ago, she whispered. Read the first paragraph, Lorna said. Kerrigan's voice, when she spoke again, sounded like it belonged to someone else. To all Skybridge partners, crew, and staff, she read. As we continue to grow from a single leased turboprop to a fleet that now spans 42 jets across 3 continents, I am reminded every day of the people who carry this company's name on their uniforms, their business cards, and their hearts. She faltered on the last word. Keep going, someone urged. Kerrigan swallowed. Many of you have never met me in person, she continued haltingly. That is by design. I prefer to see my company through your eyes, as you experience it, without the filter that titles and wealth can bring. I am the grandmother in the waiting room, the quiet passenger in the aisle seat, the black woman you pass in the terminal without a second glance. A stunned silence fell over the cabin. Lorna's eyes did not leave Kerrigan's face. When you look at me, Kerrigan read, barely above a whisper now, I hope you see a person worthy of dignity and care, regardless of whether you know my name. Because that is how I expect you to treat every soul who walks onto one of my planes. The words hung there like a verdict. No one moved. The chat on the live stream exploded, heart emojis and fire emojis and wide-eyed shock filling the screen. She wrote their manifesto and they slapped her loudly crying face. This is going to destroy that charter company, OMG. Ms. Kerrigan, Lorna said softly. The lead attendant jerked her eyes up, as though surfacing from underwater. Yes, she rasped. Lorna lifted her chin slightly. Do you remember the sentence you said to me just now? She asked. Before you opened that portal. Kerrigan's mouth opened, then closed. You told me, Lorna continued, that I had no right to be here, that I could never board one of these jets again, that you would see to it personally. She let the memory settle, not as an accusation, but as a fact. The first attendant, still standing a step behind Kerrigan, looked like she might faint. Ms. Hayes, she blurted, the name bursting out of her like a confession. I didn't know it was you. I swear, if I had known. Lorna's gaze snapped to her like a spotlight. And that, she said quietly, is exactly the problem. The first attendant's mouth snapped shut. From the doorway, the first officer shifted his weight. Captain wants to know, he began, then trailed off as his brain caught up with his eyes. Is that, he whispered, is that you? Lorna inclined her head. Yes, she said simply. No theatrics, no flourish, just the truth, placed gently in the center of the stunned cabin. The first officer's face flushed. He straightened, suddenly conscious of his posture, his tone. He said quickly. I apologize. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us on this leg. Operations didn't. His gaze flicked to the server currently betraying him on Kerrigan's phone. Clearly there was a communication breakdown. There was, Lorna agreed. She touched the tender swell of her cheek thoughtfully. It started long before I walked down that jet bridge. Someone in the back sighed, the sound shaky. This is like watching fate catch up in real time, they murmured. Beside them, another passenger whispered, she owns the jet, and they tried to kick her off. I cannot. Kerrigan's voice, when it came again, was barely audible. Ms. Hayes, she said. I'm so sorry. I lost my temper. I misjudged the situation. I've been working doubles all week, and the manifest is a mess, and when you tried to push past. Lorna held up one hand. The cabin fell silent instantly. I am 72 years old, Lorna said, her voice low but carrying. My knees do not push past anyone. A few passengers gave a startled, nervous laugh. I walked onto my own company's jet, she continued, with the correct access code, issued by my office. I identified myself by name. I requested assistance with my bags, and in response, I was shouted at, accused of trespassing, threatened with arrest, and struck across the face. She spoke as if reciting from a report, but each word vibrated with a quiet, banked fire. You all saw it, the man with the blazer said loudly, sweeping his phone to capture the whole cabin. We all heard the way they spoke to her before anyone knew who she was. That's going viral, someone muttered. It's already viral. A ping sounded on multiple phones at once. Yo, look, a passenger in the back said, half laughing in disbelief. Somebody clipped it and posted already. Flight attendant slaps old lady on private jet. It's on X. Under like 3 minutes. Check the quote tweets, another voice said. No time, someone else murmured. We're watching it live. Lorna sat back slightly, letting her gaze move from face to face. For the record, she said, I don't care that you didn't recognize me. She let that sink in. Kerrigan blinked, confused. You don't? She managed. No, Lorna said. I care that you didn't recognize my humanity. The words slid into the space between them like a blade laid gently on a table, sharp edge gleaming but still. The cabin was so quiet they could hear the faint echo of an announcement from a neighboring gate through the open door. In that silence, Lorna drew a slow breath, then exhaled. In my capacity as chairwoman and majority owner of Skybridge Aerospace Group, she said, her voice suddenly formal in a way it hadn't been a moment before, I am making a decision. Kerrigan's knees wobbled. Ms. Hayes, she whispered. Please, I've been with this company for 9 years. I have a mortgage. Kids. This job. Lorna's eyes softened, just a fraction. And how many passengers have you shouted at in those 9 years? She asked quietly. How many did not have the power to answer you? Kerrigan's lips trembled. I don't, she stammered. It's never. I've never hit anyone before. I swear to you, that was. I believe you, Lorna said. Shock rippled again. You do? The first attendant blinked rapidly. Yes, Lorna said, because this is not about the slap. She touched her swelling cheek again, almost absently. This is about the reflex that led to it. She turned, slightly, so that the cameras would catch her profile, the discoloration on her skin, the steady focus of her eyes. In the interest of the safety and dignity of every person who will ever board one of my aircraft, she said, I am relieving this entire cabin crew of duty. Effective immediately. The first attendant's hand flew to her mouth. The phones caught the moment. The way her shoulders crumpled. The way Kerrigan sagged as if a string had been cut. Ms. Hayes, the first officer started. You can't just. It's in the operating agreement, Lorna said without looking at him. Article 7, Section 3. The owner reserves the right to request immediate crew replacement if behavior compromising safety or company values is observed. You may call operations to confirm. The first officer swallowed. He had read Article 7. He simply never expected to see it invoked by the woman whose name sat under the company logo. We'll have to delay the flight, he said weakly. Find backup crew. That could take hours. These passengers have connections, meetings. I understand, Lorna said. She lifted her phone, finally, and tapped a contact labeled simply. Maya, Ku. The call connected almost instantly. Boss, came a crisp voice through the speaker. You're supposed to be wheels up in 20. You okay? Lorna turned the screen so the nearest cameras could see the name without hearing the number. I'm on board Jet 7 at Gate C14, she said. We have a situation. Talk to me, Maya said. No nonsense. A cabin crew member struck a passenger, Lorna said. The passenger was me. I am requesting immediate crew replacement under Article 7. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. Are you injured? Maya demanded, voice tight. I'll live, Lorna said. The question is whether our culture will. A beat of silence. Then, understood, Maya said, tone changing. I'm calling ground ops now. We'll have a fresh crew to you as fast as humanly possible. I'll also get legal looped in. Are you comfortable staying on board while we sort this? Yes, Lorna said. The passengers will need reassurance. And so will the internet. Maya gave a humorless huff. Already seeing chatter? She asked. Phones everywhere, Lorna replied. Of course, Maya muttered. Okay, I'm on it. And Lorna? Yes. I'm so sorry, Maya said quietly. We will make this right. We will try, Lorna corrected gently. That's all we can promise. She ended the call and set the phone down slowly on the folding table, the screen still glowing. Then she looked back up at the crew. Ms. Kerrigan, she said. You and your team will please gather your things and step off the aircraft. Operations will meet you at the gate. You are suspended with pay pending a full investigation. But to be clear, she let the words hang, not as cruelty, but as clarity. None of you will ever work a Skybridge cabin again. The first attendant let out a soft, strangled sob. My kids, she whispered. Kerrigan's eyes filled. I know I deserve, she began, then choked on the rest. Lorna's expression dipped, just for a moment, into something like sorrow. I do not take any pleasure in this, she said softly. Your livelihoods are not game pieces for me to move. I remember what it is to live paycheck to paycheck. I remember what it is to fear a pink slip. Her gaze hardened, just slightly. But I also remember every time I was told I was in the wrong line, the wrong office, the wrong neighborhood, the wrong school, the wrong country, the wrong life. I remember every hand that grabbed my arm to push me back where they thought I belonged. She inclined her head toward her bruised cheek. This is the first time that hand has come from someone wearing my company's wings, she said. And it will be the last. Kerrigan nodded jerkily, tears spilling over. I understand, she whispered. Do you? Lorna asked, tilting her head. Or do you just regret that I was the one you hit? Kerrigan flinched as if struck. She began, then stopped. The plane seemed to lean with all the eyes on her. I don't know, she said hoarsely. I thought you were. I don't know what I thought. I saw someone walking onto a jet without the right look, without the right paperwork, and I... She closed her eyes briefly. I assumed you didn't belong, she said. I assumed you were lying. I assumed you were trouble. Because... Lorna prompted gently. Kerrigan's shoulders shook. Because you look like my mental picture of a problem, she whispered. An old lady. Alone. Wrong clothes. Wrong. She swallowed hard. Wrong color, she finished, barely audible. No one in the cabin moved. The admission didn't excuse anything. It didn't heal the blooming bruise on Lorna's cheek or erase the threat of security still lingering in the air like smoke. But it was a crack, and through cracks, light could sometimes get in. Thank you, Lorna said quietly, for saying that out loud. Kerrigan looked confused. You're thanking me, she whispered. For not lying to yourself in front of all these witnesses, Lorna said. Self-deception is how this rot keeps growing. She gestured gently toward the aisle. Now, she said, please, gather your things. Kerrigan nodded woodenly. She turned to the first attendant, who was openly crying. Let's go, she said softly. Come on. The younger woman looked at Lorna, eyes red and wide. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't stop her. I didn't say anything. I just wanted us to leave on time. What's your name? Lorna asked. Haley, she said. Lorna's brow twitched, but she didn't react to the name beyond that. Haley, she repeated. Do you think on-time departure is more important than a person's dignity? Haley shook her head miserably. No, she said. But in the moment, it felt like everything. We get written up if we delay. We get punished if we don't control the cabin. I got scared. I know, Lorna said gently. Fear makes cowards of all of us. Someday, you may get another chance to choose differently. Haley blinked. But you said, she began. I said you would never work a Skybridge cabin again, Lorna said. I did not say you would never serve another person with kindness. Life is longer than one job. Haley nodded slowly, tears spilling over again. Thank you, she whispered. She followed Kerrigan down the aisle, past the cameras, past the stays, past the weight of her own actions. The remaining crew, a young man from catering, a contracted concierge, trailed behind them, faces pale and stunned. As they stepped into the jet bridge, the door still open behind them, a voice called after them. Hey, the man in the blazers said. They turned. Next time you feel like yelling at an old black woman, he said, not unkindly, maybe ask yourself if you'd talk to your own grandmother that way, whether she owns the plane or not. Haley flinched. Kerrigan's jaw clenched. They disappeared into the corridor. The first officer lingered at the doorway for a moment, looking shell-shocked. Ms. Hayes, he said. What do you want us to do now? Lorna looked past him to the terminal beyond, where gate agents were starting to gather, alerted by operations, brows furrowed in curiosity and worry. "Close the door," she said. He blinked. "Close it," he repeated, startled. "But we don't have a crew. We can't depart." "I didn't say depart," Lorna said. "I said close the door. This cabin is full of people who just watch their worldview tilt. They don't need an audience walking by to point at them like animals in a zoo." The first officer nodded quickly. "Yes," he said. He stepped into the doorway, signaled to the gate agent, and swung the heavy door shut with a hiss. The outside world disappeared, leaving them cocooned in leather and light and the quiet after a storm. For a moment, no one spoke. Then a passenger in the back cleared his throat. He said. "Ms. Hayes." Lorna turned in her seat to face them all properly for the first time. "Yes. My name's Victor," he said. I'm the CFO of the company that chartered this jet today, and I just want to say thank you for not covering this up, for handling it in front of us." He hesitated. "And I'm sorry," he added, "for the way we all watched it like a show before we remembered it was your face." A murmur of agreement rolled through the cabin. Lorna's eyes softened. "You remembered," she said. "That's what matters now." A woman in the gray suit lifted her own phone. "Do you mind if I keep this rolling?" she asked. "I think people need to see what you say next." Lorna considered that. The swelling on her cheek ached. Her heart did too. "Tag Skybridge," she said, "and make sure they spell my name right." A ripple of laughter moved through the cabin, small but real. Lorna shifted slightly, turning so that the phones could see her clearly, but so that the passengers in front of her did not become props in someone else's morality play. "Before new crew arrives," she said quietly, "I'd like to say something. Not just to the people in this cabin, but to anyone who will watch this later." She looked into the nearest camera lens. "If you are watching this," she said, "you've probably already seen the moment that flight attendant hit me." She paused. "I'm not going to replay it," she said. "Once was enough." A soft, rueful murmur. "I know some of you will freeze the frame and zoom in and make jokes," she continued. "That's what we do now. We turn pain into content. We turn humiliation into trends." She shook her head slightly. "But I need you to understand," she said, "that what happened on this plane is not just about one woman losing her temper. It is about what we all carry inside us when we look at someone and decide, in a fraction of a second, that they do not belong." Her eyes flicked briefly to Victor, to the woman in gray, to the kid in the hoodie, to every passenger who had sat and watched. "When you feel that itch in your chest," she said, "that says, this person is out of place. They're in the good line, the nice store, the first-class cabin, the gated neighborhood, the corner office, the private jet, and something about that bothers me. I want you to stop and ask yourself one question." She lifted a finger, as if pointing at each viewer personally. "Is it the situation that bothers you?" she asked. "Or is it the story you've been fed your whole life about who is supposed to be in that space?" She let the question hang. A passenger sniffed quietly, wiping at their eyes. Lorna continued. "Bias is not always a burning cross on a lawn," she said. "Sometimes it's a sigh when a black family sits next to you at a nice restaurant. Sometimes it's an extra ID check at the airport. Sometimes it's you in the wrong seat said a little too sharp, a little too loud, in front of a crowd that's all too ready to watch you be corrected." She glanced at the phones again. "I am rich," she said bluntly. "Let's not pretend otherwise. I own planes. I have lawyers. I have the direct line to the person who can fire an entire crew in 10 minutes. She touched her cheek once more, then let her hand fall. "And even with all that," she said quietly, "I could not stop that hand from hitting my face." The cabin seemed to shrink around her words. "So I want you to imagine," she said, "what happens to the women who look like me but don't have my money. To the men who look like my brothers, my uncles, my grandsons, who don't have a camera pointed at them when someone calls security. To the kids who will remember every time someone told them they were in the wrong place until they start to believe it." Her gaze warmed, even as her tone remained firm. "This is not about revenge," she said. "I did not fire that crew because I wanted to ruin their lives. I did it because some doors need to close for a company to grow a conscience. There will be investigations. There will be HR processes. There will be chances for them to learn and rebuild somewhere else. I hope they take them. She took a slow breath. But they also have to be consequences, she said. Because without consequences, apologies are just noise we make to feel better about ourselves. Victor shifted, nodding slightly. When you share this, Lorna added, and I know you will, don't just share the slap. Share the part where we talk about what comes next. Her gaze softened further. Ask your companies, she said, what they are doing to train people not just in safety and efficiency, but in empathy. Ask your leaders if they've ever sat in the back of their own plane and listened. Ask yourself when the last time was that you used your voice in the moment, not just in the comments section afterward. The man in the blazer swallowed hard. I should have said something sooner, he muttered, half to himself, half to the camera. You spoke, Lorna said gently. Maybe not as early as you wish you had. That's okay. The next time will come sooner than you think. Practice now. A faint, rueful smile touched her lips. And if you are ever in a position of power, she concluded, whether that's running a company or just choosing where to sit, remember this. The way you treat the person you think has nothing to offer you is the truest measure of who you are. She let the words settle into the stillness. Then she nodded once. That's all, she said softly. The woman in gray switched her phone camera off with trembling hands. Wow, she whispered. That was... Someone in the back murmured, then trailed off, unable to find a word big enough. On screen, for the thousands already watching live, comments flooded in. This needs to be played in every HR orientation ever. I'm crying at my desk, RN. Tag your company's CEO. A knock sounded softly at the closed cabin door. The first officer moved to open it, revealing a new crew waiting on the jet bridge. Faces anxious, posture respectful. Their lead, a man in his 50s with kind eyes, stepped in first, hat in hand. Ms. Hayes, he said quietly, we've been briefed. We're here to take over, if you'll still have us. Lorna nodded. Welcome aboard, she said. He glanced at her cheek, pain flickering over his features. On behalf of every decent crew member out there, he said hoarsely, I am so sorry that happened to you. To anyone. Thank you, Lorna said simply. As the new crew moved down the aisle, introducing themselves to passengers, offering water and apologies, the tension in the cabin slowly shifted from brittle to something else. Not comfort, not yet, but maybe possibility. Victor leaned into the aisle. Ms. Hayes, he said, if you'd prefer, I can have my company's legal team coordinate with yours on any statements. This is going to be a thing. Publicly. Oh. It will be, Lorna agreed. But I have my own team. Thank you. He hesitated. If there's anything our company can do to support whatever initiative you spin out of this, he added, weigh in. Lorna arched an eyebrow. You assume I'm going to start an initiative, she said. He smiled faintly. I assume you're going to turn this into something bigger than one bad day on a plane, he replied. People like you don't waste pain. Lorna's gaze drifted to the window, where the wing gleamed in the muted daylight. We'll see, she said. The news cycle did what it always did. By the time Flight SB707 finally lifted off the ground, the footage from Lorna's cabin had already bounced across platforms, stitched into reactions, analyzed in duets and think pieces and shake-a-voice commentary from viewers who saw their own grandparents in Lorna's face. The first clip showed the slap. The second clip showed the reveal. The third clip showed the speech. By afternoon, a trending hashtag had emerged, #OnHerOwnJet. Some used it to make memes. Others used it to share their own stories. Got told, this line is for business class when I was standing in the business class line, while holding a business class ticket. #OnHerOwnJet. Watched my mom be asked 3 times if she was in the right place at a parent-teacher conference. She's the principal. #OnHerOwnJet. Skybridge PR team moved quickly, but not quickly enough to outrun the first wave. A press release appeared on their site within hours. We are aware of an incident involving inappropriate conduct by contracted cabin crew toward our chairwoman, Ms. Lorna R. Hayes. This behavior is unacceptable and does not reflect our values. The statement trendjacked, dissected line by line. Some said it wasn't enough. Others said it was a start. Investors called. Partners texted. The board convened an emergency remote session before the plane even landed. "We need to get ahead of this," one director said, his video feed flickering. "We can't have a narrative be racist airline owned by black woman." "The narrative is whatever actually happened," Maya replied coolly. "And what happened is a textbook case of bias under pressure. We have an opportunity to respond with something other than defensiveness for once. We need to reassure shareholders," another director insisted. "The stock dipped 4 points already. And it'll come back up if we show we're serious," Maya shot back. "Or would you rather patch this with a hollow apology and wait for the next viral moment to cost us more?" On the other end of the line, Lorna sat in the back of a town car on the tarmac, listening. She could feel the dull ache in her cheekbone, the stiffness settling in now that the adrenaline had faded. Someone from the medical team had offered ice at the gate. She'd accepted, more out of habit than vanity. "We need to think about the crew," another board member said cautiously. "There are union considerations. Contracts. We can't just—" "I didn't just do anything," Lorna said quietly into the speakerphone for the first time. "Article 7 exists for a reason. We will honor our contracts. We will also honor our values." The line went silent. Lorna, one of the older directors, began, more gently than the rest. "You know I respect you. But some will say you overreacted. Shooting an ant with a cannon. You could have exhibited grace. Forgiveness. Use this as a teachable moment." Lorna's eyes flicked to her own reflection in the car window, the faint imprint of fingers still blooming along her jaw. "Forgiveness," she said softly, "is not the opposite of consequences. I can forgive in my heart and still protect everyone who comes after me." She paused. "And if firing an entire crew feels like a cannon to you," she added, "it's only because you have never been the ant." Maya's camera stabilized as if she'd settled more firmly in her chair. "I propose we do 3 things," she said briskly. 1. Full independent investigation. Publicly shared findings, not just internal. 2. Mandatory bias and empathy training for every person who wears our logo, board included. 3. We fund a program to recruit, train, and elevate more black and brown crew members and leaders, so that no one has to feel like an outlier in their own workspace. "That last one is going to cost money," a director muttered. "So does losing customers," Maya replied. Lorna closed her eyes briefly, letting the voices wash over her. This, too, was part of the fallout. Not the online rage or the trending hashtags, but the grind of policy and budgets and intentions shaped into something that might actually outlast the news cycle. "Do it," she said quietly. "All of it." The line fell silent again. "You're sure?" Maya asked. "I did not spend 40 years climbing from unemployment line to private jet just to let fear drive our decisions now," Lorna said. "We will do it right, or we will not do it at all." One by one, the directors relented. Votes tallied. Not just for the optics, but because some of them, if they were honest, had felt something crack open in their own chests watching that footage. Later, Lorna's legal team reached out to the union representing the dismissed crew. There were meetings. There were tears. There were apologies, some perfunctory, some gut-level and raw. Kerrigan sat across from an HR panel and a therapist, hands twisting in her lap. "I watched that video 100 times, she said, voice hollow. "I don't even recognize myself. I sound like every woman I swore I'd never become." "Who did you remind yourself of?" the therapist asked gently. "My mother," she whispered. "Whenever we went anywhere nice, she'd tense up. She'd hiss under her breath if she saw someone who looked like they didn't fit. She'd say things like, 'They're lowering the standards.' I always thought she was just old-fashioned. But the second I felt out of control on that plane..." She covered her face. "I became her," she choked. "With my uniform on." The union fought to salvage what they could. In the end, contracts were honored. Severance packages negotiated. Mandatory counseling offered. Kerrigan disappeared from the skies. Sometimes she sat in her small backyard, watching the contrails of planes above, feeling the weight of what she'd lost. Sometimes she volunteered at a community center, reading to kids who looked like younger versions of the woman she'd once hit. The first attendant, Haley, took a job at a ground-level customer service desk for a different company months later, her name tag clipped to a new uniform. She caught herself, more than once, about to raise her voice at someone, and felt Lorna's eyes on her in her memory. She lowered her voice instead. She asked a question. Sometimes she apologized first. Up in the stratosphere, Skybridge planes kept flying. The stock dipped. It climbed back. Some corporate clients shifted to other charters, muttering about drama. Others switched to Skybridge, impressed by the transparency and the speed of their reforms. The hashtag faded from the trending lists, replaced by new outrage, new memes, new moments. But in quiet corners of HR meeting rooms, in training slides, in onboarding sessions, Lorna's speech played on loop. Sometimes, the recruits watched with arms crossed, skeptical. Sometimes, they wiped at their eyes. 6 months later, the bruise on Lorna's cheek was long gone, but people still looked for it when they met her. They glanced at her skin as if expecting to see the ghost of a handprint lingering there. What they saw instead was a woman moving a little more slowly up the steps of a stage at an industry conference, but with her back straight and her scarf gleaming with those same silver threads. The event was billed as the future of aviation leadership. Panels on sustainability, AI and scheduling, luxury customer experience. But the room was packed for one session in particular, the one with her name on it. Keynote, Who Belongs in the Sky, with Lorna R. Hayes. Lorna looked out over the sea of faces, mostly men, mostly white, mostly in suits that all seemed to share the same shade of navy. She could see, near the front, a row of younger professionals, more diverse, eyes bright, phones ready to capture. She took her place behind the podium and smiled. When I was a little girl, she began, the only time I saw a black woman on a plane, she was pushing a cart. She let that sit. I never imagined, she continued, that I would one day own the plane instead. A ripple of laughter, softer this time, threaded with something like hope. You all know why I'm here, she said. Not just because I happen to run a successful charter company, but because 6 months ago, I ended up on all your screens for a reason no one wants. There was an uneasy murmur. Some shifted in their seats. I'm not going to rehash it blow by blow, she said. You've seen the clip. What I want to talk about is everything that came after. She spoke about the investigation, about the training, about the uncomfortable conversations in boardrooms and break rooms. She showed a slide of the new program Skybridge had launched. Scholarships for aspiring pilots and crew from underrepresented communities, internships that paid enough to live on, mentorship programs that matched kids from neighborhoods like the one she'd grown up in with captains who'd once only seen them from behind a service cart. We call it the Skybridge Uplift Initiative, she said, because the sky isn't just for those who can afford a ticket. It's for those who dream of being part of the journey. She watched as some attendees took notes. Others frowned, calculating budgets. She didn't mind. Seats took time. In the months since that day, she said, I've received thousands of messages. Some from people who saw themselves in my story. Some from crew members terrified that one moment of stress might be recorded and shared forever. She nodded. To you, I say, I understand, she said. We are all more than the worst moments someone caught on film. But we have to stop treating the camera like the enemy. The lens doesn't create what it captures. It just shows it to more people. She paused, then smiled faintly. And yes, she added, I still board my own planes unannounced sometimes. Old habits die hard. A ripple of laughter. But something has changed, she said. Not just in my company, but in me. She thought of Zoe, scrolling through the comments section late at night, sending her screenshots of strangers saying thank you and others saying she overreacted. She thought of Kerrigan in that HR room, the moment she admitted the words wrong color out loud. I used to think my job as a leader was to make everything smooth, Lorna said. No turbulence. No scandals, no messy public reckonings. But the truth is, sometimes you have to let the plane shake a little so people wake up and put their seatbelts on. She let the metaphor land. Somewhere in the front row, someone chuckled appreciatively. In the end, she said, this industry isn't about metal and fuel and profit margins. It's about people. People in uniforms and people in seat 14A. People who save for years for one special trip and people who fly twice a week for work. Her gaze drifted over the crowd. If the only time those people feel seen is when something goes wrong on camera, she said softly, we have failed. She took a breath, the kind that gathered itself in her chest and then unfurled through every word. I am asking you, she said, to lead in a way that doesn't wait for a viral moment to force your hand. Sit in the back of your own plane. Stand in your own check-in line. Listen at your own gates. And when you hear someone question a person's right to be there, ask yourself, what story is driving that question? She stepped away from the podium then, just a little, so she could see them without the barrier. Because the sky doesn't care about the stories we tell ourselves, she said. It doesn't care about age or skin or accent or balance sheet. It holds every one of us up the same way. The least we can do, down here, is try to meet that standard. The room rose to its feet. Not instantly, not in a cheesy movie way, but in waves, people pushing their chairs back, awkward at first and then more certain, until she was looking out at a sea of standing figures. Some clapped slowly, others more urgently. A few wiped at their eyes, half embarrassed, half relieved. Later, after the conference, a clip of her closing remarks would circulate online. Not as widely as the slap, of course. Pain traveled faster than wisdom. But it traveled. And in living rooms and break rooms and cramped crew lounges across the world, people watched an older black woman with silver curls talk about belonging in the sky. And something in them shifted. A year after the incident, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Lorna sat in her garden again, the lemon tree a little taller, the air a little warmer. Zoe sat cross-legged on the patio, laptop open, headphones around her neck. They are still using your speech in training, she reported, scrolling. Someone leaked the updated modules. They added a whole section called Moments of Truth. Lorna murmured, pruning a stray branch. And what do they call the slap? Zoe grimaced. The incident, she said. Corporate can't resist capital letters. Lorna chuckled softly. Well, she said, at least they aren't pretending it didn't happen. Zoe closed her laptop and looked at her grandmother thoughtfully. Do you ever regret it? She asked suddenly. Regret what? Lorna said, firing the crew on the spot, letting it all play out online, turning your pain into this. She gestured vaguely around them, meaning the programs, the speeches, the endless conversations. You could have handled it quietly, protected yourself, avoided all the trolls. Lorna weighed the question carefully, as she did everything. I regret that it had to happen at all, she said finally. I regret that there are still so many people who look at someone like me and see a trespasser instead of a traveler. She snipped a dead leaf, letting it fall. But do I regret using that moment to build something? She continued. No. Pain is a terrible landlord. If you're going to let it live in your body rent-free, it might as well do some chores. Zoe laughed, startled. That is not the metaphor I was expecting, she said. Lorna smiled, lines crinkling at the corners of her eyes. I don't recommend seeking out humiliation, she said. I don't recommend getting slapped on camera. But if it happens, I recommend making sure you're not the only one who learns from it. Zoe nodded slowly. What happened to that flight attendant? She asked, curiosity tinged with something like concern. Kerrigan, Lorna said, surprised at how quickly the name still came. Last I heard, she was working at a small regional airport. Groundside. Took the company up on the counseling. She sent me a letter, you know. Zoe's eyes widened. She did. Yes, Lorna said. Handwritten. People don't do that much anymore. What did she say? Zoe asked. She told me, Lorna said, that losing her job forced her to look in a mirror she'd been avoiding for years. That she didn't ask for grace that day, but she's trying to earn it now. That she's teaching her kids to notice their assumptions before they act on them. Zoe considered that. Do you forgive her? She asked. Lorna thought of the sting on her cheek, long gone but never quite forgotten. I forgave her the moment I realized she was more afraid of being exposed than I was of being hit, she said. The rest is between her and whatever she believes in when she looks at herself in the dark. Zoe fell quiet for a moment. Then she looked up, mischief flickering through the seriousness. "You still boarding your jets in stealth mode?" she asked. Lorna's smile turned sly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Old habits. Don't you worry people will recognize you now?" Zoe asked. "You're like aviation famous. Internet auntie." "Some do," Lorna said. "Some don't. Some see an old black woman and assume I'm someone's nanny. Some see my scarf and think it's just fashion, not armor." She reached out and plucked a lemon, rolling it between her palms. "The question isn't whether they recognize me," she said. "It's whether they recognize the humanity in whoever sits down next to them, with or without a hashtag." Zoe sat back, letting that sink in. A plane passed overhead. A thin silver line scratched across the blue. They both looked up, instinctively. "Grandma," Zoe said, eyes on the distant contrail. "Yes, baby." "Do you think," she hesitated, "do you think this actually changed anything? Like, really changed? Or did the world just scroll on?" Lorna followed the plane's path until it vanished into the brightness. "Change is like flying," she said after a moment. "From the ground, it looks like nothing is moving. The plane is just a dot in the sky. But inside, everything is shifting. People are leaving old lives behind, landing in new places. The distance is being eaten mile by mile, even if you can't see it from your lawn chair." She turned her gaze back to Zoe. "Somewhere," she said, "a young attendant is biting their tongue instead of snapping at a passenger. Somewhere, a manager is stepping in Alia. Somewhere, a kid is watching my video and thinking, maybe I do belong there." She smiled, soft and sure. "That's change," she said. "It's not as flashy as a slap. It doesn't trend, but it lands." Zoe nodded slowly, absorbing the image. A notification pinged on her laptop. She glanced at it, then grinned. "Skybridge just announced a partnership with that youth aviation nonprofit," she said. "You're funding flight lessons for like 100 kids this year." Lorna shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Seems only fair," she said. "The skies held me up long enough. Time I helped some others up there." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the garden humming softly around them. Eventually, Zoe closed her laptop and looked at her grandmother with a thoughtful tilt of her head. "If you could talk directly to all the people who watch what happened to you," she said, "not just on that plane, but on their phones, what would you say now? Like, if you could leave them with one question." Lorna leaned back in her chair, the lemon still warm in her hand. "One question," she repeated. She looked past the garden, past the fence, as if seeing all the living rooms and buses and break rooms where her face had once flashed on screens. "I'd ask them," she said slowly, "to think about the last time they saw someone being put in their place. Maybe it was a cashier being scolded, a coworker talked over, a stranger told they were in the wrong line." She turned the lemon over. "I'd ask them," she continued, "what role they played in that moment. Did they laugh? Did they stay quiet? Did they raise their phone instead of their voice?" Her eyes met Zoe's, clear and steady. "And then," she said, "I'd ask them this. The next time you're in that kind of moment, and there will be a next time, who do you want to be?" She let the question hang there, not just between her and Zoe now, but reaching outward toward all the unseen listeners that conversation might someday touch. "The one who swings the hand," she said softly. "The one who watches in silence. Or the one who steps in and says, 'She belongs here,' before someone has to pull out a phone to prove it." She set the lemon down on the table, its bright yellow skin a small sun between them. "So," she murmured, almost to herself, almost to you, "when that moment comes, which one will you choose?" And somewhere far beyond the garden, in crowded terminals and quiet cabins, in offices and apartment kitchens, in the small private space where each person kept their own truths, the question waited, patient as gravity, for an answer.